September 12, 1992. The Space Shuttle Endeavour crew are about to embark on a week-long mission. Among the 7 chosen is the first African-American female astronaut. This Star Trek fan has always dreamed of going to space. Her lifelong goal is about to be realized.
I knew I couldn't go back.
You just put it out there.
She said you've got less than a year to live.
Just dug even
Luck
deeper.
is the residue of design.
Nobody else was doing it, so why couldn't I?
That was the turning point.
Welcome to the BUCKiT podcast with Phil Keoghan. Every week I talk to mavericks, disruptors, and innovators. People who ditch the excuses, swerve off the predictable road, and epitomize what it means to tick it before you kick it. In 1987, Dr. Mae Jemison was one of only 15 selected for the prestigious NASA program, and 5 years later, the first black woman to fly into space. At just 16, Jemison went to Stanford University and studied chemical engineering. After graduating med school, she managed the entire healthcare program for the Peace Corps, working in Cambodian refugee camps and in West Africa. But Mae couldn't let go of her burning desire to become an astronaut. A cold call to receptionists at Kennedy Space Center changed all that. Mae Jemison was about to make history.
People would say, well, what is it like being the first African-American woman astronaut, the first astronaut woman of color in the world to go into space?
Yeah.
And what do you think about people who think that's really cool? And I'm just having a hard time with that because I would have been an astronaut if there had never been anyone in the world who had gone into space.
Regardless of whether
or if
you're
it
a
had
woman
been-
or you're black.
And if it had been thousands of people, I want to go into space,
Right.
right? So I always assumed I would go into space.
There was no doubt?
No.
That's amazing. The story of you calling up to be an astronaut, like literally just picking up the phone. I mean, talk about knowing what you want. Where does that power come from? It's so audacious what you did. Like, can you tell us about that phone call? I'm just wondering, like, were you nervous or were you just like, no, they're going to take me. I'm an astronaut.
Calling up to Johnson Space Center.
Yeah.
I know they were doing astronaut selections. And I said, I'd like to get an application to the astronaut program. They said, okay, we're going to transfer you to the astronaut selection office.
When?
And they knew. They transferred me, gave them the name, they sent out the application.
That was the beginning of your journey.
And you know, the thing is you never know until you try. One of the things that I think that keeps people not progressing and getting to where they want to be is they're afraid someone may laugh at them, right? That fear keeps you from moving forward. And it's not that I've conquered all my fears about doing certain things, but it's really about how do you move forward? You have to sometimes risk things,
Yeah.
you know? And if somebody laughs at you, what the hell?
I think that's just so wonderful well, look, I mean, I know that wasn't it had nothing to do with you being a woman or being an African-American woman to be an astronaut. You just wanted to be an astronaut. But
I wanted to go into space.
You wanted to, yes, I'm sorry.
And however I could get there, if I could have stood in a cornfield
Yes.
with aluminum foil on my head and
Or
been
a whole bunch of
guaranteed-
balloons?
And guaranteed, no, I was going to try with E.T.
Oh, E.T.
With the cornfield. But I didn't know that was going to work, so I
Yeah.
had to call Johnson.
Yeah, of course. Hey, I need to hitch a ride and get up there. Mae's dream to enter the NASA astronaut training program was cut short. In 1986, the space shuttle disaster, which shocked the world, put space travel on hold. But the next year, she reapplied and was accepted as one of 15 candidates in a highly competitive field of over 2,000 applicants. On September 12, 1992, Mae Jemison became the first African-American woman in space. The space shuttle Endeavour carried her and 6 other astronauts on 126 orbits around the Earth. You know, one of the things I read, which I was so heartfelt reading about when you launched and you looked down on your hometown of Chicago. And I just felt something, because the other day I saw a photograph of New Zealand from space. And I said, oh, wow, I'd love to see that. And I'm just thinking, as a little girl, the idea that one day you would look down on Chicago and see this place where you grew up.
To be able to get that thought process, I'd have to go back and imagine being a little girl who met me.
Yeah.
Right? And what it would have been like
Well, what
if
would
I
you
had
have said
been a
to that
little girl.
What would you have said?
I don't know what I would have said, but I know that the little girl would have had a great big grin on her face, right?
Oh, yeah. When you look down on Chicago, were your parents down there?
No, they were actually, they stayed at Kennedy's, they stayed in Orlando until I got back.
Can you imagine as parents what that would be like? You know, to have brought you up and tried so hard to give you everything that they possibly could as parents, and then they see their little girl, because you know they were thinking of you as a little girl in that.
You know, I
right?
never asked them about that.
But can you imagine, like, I'm thinking of my daughter, if my daughter ends up going to space, I'll be thinking of her as the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders, something like, wow, you know, excited but also scared.
Well, by the time I went to the astronaut program, I'd done a couple other things to sort of
make them proud.
Well, I don't know about make them proud, put little people on edge. I worked in a Cambodian refugee camp.
You worked for Peace Corps too.
Well, I was the Area Peace Corps medical officer for Sierra Leone and Liberia for 2.5 years. I literally worked in a Cambodian refugee camp on the border with them when the Khmer Rouge, when the Khmer left.
Wow.
And I went on patrols with the Thai military. And I had these pictures.
You like living on the edge, don't you?
No,
you just find yourself on the edge. Somehow.
I don't think of it that way. I mean, it's just like you try stuff, right? But it's not foolishness. Like, no. I'm not going to put myself in.
That curiosity is taking you to these places.
And you think about it a little bit differently, right? And
do you make lists? Are you I mean, how all the things that you've achieved is it's just wonderful to look at all the different things that you've done and to be where you are now and be able to share your knowledge and inspiration. Are you someone who sits down and you go, I'm going to do this and I'm going to travel here? Or is it just something, do you just sort of roll with the punches, or how does that work?
I think you sort of have things in the back of your mind, and then if you're a busybody, then you're open to opportunities and things that may happen. So I knew that I wanted to, when I was, always was very interested in travel and being able to go in different places in the world. And so you're just sort of listening to see when those opportunities come up. Sometimes you're very methodical and directed about it. I knew after I had experienced working with the flying doctors in East Africa, after I had worked in the Cambodian refugee camp in medical school, I knew I wanted to go somewhere and work in a developing country for a long time before I, went on and did my advanced technology kind of biomedical engineering career. And so I was very methodical about that. And I could have gone as a doc or I could have gone as an engineer. I really didn't care. And so you're just open to those opportunities and you look for it.
Did you share that with those around you, and did they embrace the idea, or did they just say, oh yeah, you're a dreamer, or like what was that support mechanism like around you, your family? And
I chose my parents well.
Yes.
That's the first thing I did.
Okay.
And I was, they were very supportive of my curiosity. I was a third of 3 children, so my brother and sister, I used to hang out with them and their projects. I was pretty precocious, and they were very bright and doing really neat things. And so I was just, I had this freedom to, I've had all the books with the, about space exploration. I was always looking stuff, but I was always doing science projects, but I wanted to be a dancer, for example. And I talked my mother into making sure I had dance classes, and I would go to those. I had art classes, all of these kinds of things. And I would tell people that I assume I'd go into space, and I had teachers who believed me. But during that time, there were no women astronauts in the United States. Valentina Tereshkova had gone up in Russia.
Yeah, and that was quite early on, too.
63.
63.
63.
Which is, 20 years before the first?
Sally Ride, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I knew that as a little girl.
Yeah.
But even if I didn't know it, I was this adamant women's liberal as a little girl, right?
Yeah.
Like a 7, 8-year-old going around telling people, no, this is the way it is. But when people tried to tell me that there were reasons why women didn't go into space, and even my dad or somebody might try to tell me the things, I was just like, y'all wrong. It's just not true.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't believe it.
Mae never stopped believing in herself. Young and full of dreams, she went to Stanford University at just 16 years old. I'm interested in that pathway in your life. You're obviously very creative and you can dance, and then you've also got this amazing mind to be able to become a doctor. And was there a junction point? Was there a moment in your life where you went, I'm going to go, I don't know whether to go left or right? Was there a pivotal point, I guess.
Well, I mean, I always liked the sciences. I always liked the arts when I was a little kid. I danced all the time. I did art classes
Still dance?
and stuff.
Still get up and dance?
I can shake a leg every now and then. Right?
Okay.
But I did art classes because these all things were all exciting. Every now and then you have to make a decision as to what you're going to do, right? So at some point, before I went to medical school, as I was graduating from college, I was a chemical engineering major, and I majored in African studies as well. But I danced all the way through college. And the decision was, do I go to New York City to become a professional dancer or go to medical school?
Yeah.
That was a decision point. I can go to medical school because I can still dance. And I still took classes at Alvin Ailey and all of those kind of things. But I couldn't become a professional dancer because you need to be fairly young and you need to still have all of that, you know.
Yeah.
Even at 20, when I was graduating from college, I was kind of old for pursuing being a professional dancer, right? But, you know, that's a decision point, and sometimes you can't do everything.
Yeah. Having grown up in the 60s and the changes that you have seen in the world. I mean, just in the last decade, how much the world has changed, and our attitudes towards race and women and, you know, homosexual law reform and all of these things. For those people in 2018, young people, they're listening to you and they feel like they have obstacles in their way, and that they can't get out of the place that they're in. And some of them are in really difficult situations. What do you say to them? What are things that will help them have some hope, I guess, that they can make a move forward and do the things they want to do?
Well, so we always have hope,
Yeah.
right? And we have to have faith in ourselves that we have the ability to do this. So the one thing I always talk about is to don't just look at the obstacle. So sometimes we get stuck looking at the obstacle and trying to make it go away. I always say, what is it that you want? And then figure out how to get that. That obstacle might have to hang out by itself, but I'm going to go over here on this other side, right?
Yeah.
I may have to do this a little bit differently, but I'm going to still get what I want. I used to keep the word purpose in front of my desk at NASA so that I knew, why was I there? I was there because I wanted to go into space. That's the reason I was there. So whatever happens, what was my purpose? I wanted to go into space. What do I need to do to make sure that I go into space?
I love that.
And I think that that's how you deal with some of these obstacles, because some people may never change,
Yeah.
right? You may never get someone who's racist, sexist, or just belligerently ignorant.
Yes.
You may not ever get them to change.
You bring up a good point, Mae, because what I've found as I've got older, and I grew up as the only white kid in my class, and so I sort of saw racism the other way. I didn't know racism towards black people. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned as I've got older is I'm more interested in why someone is racist or why they think a certain way. I'm just so intrigued. Like, how did your mind, your beautiful human mind, get to that place where you could have such hatred for somebody who is different from you? And I think that's where we're getting hung up right now in the world, where there isn't enough of this dialogue. And that dialogue comes from communicating with each other, where we're connecting with each other, where we're connecting with the world. So I'm just hoping that this new generation, that the good thing that will come from technology is that we'll connect with each other and find a way to talk to each other and understand and bridge that gap somehow.
Well, I think one of the things I've always noticed that when people are near other people and they have to have an interplay, that ideas start to change and they start to form differently, right? And so a lot of the work that I've done has been to do that. So when I first got out of NASA, I started a program called The Earth We Share, an international science camp. Brought kids from around the world.
Oh, I heard about this. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
And with, kids from rural areas in the United States and cities and different countries, when they're like 12 to 16 years of age, because they have enough background in their own culture to be able to share it, but they're still very hungry to learn different things.
Yeah.
And we never do anything by ourselves. So I've always felt that we need to think through this.
Yes.
And the more you're around people, the more connected, the more you can see the humanity in others. I don't think that we feel connected to the rest of the world. We don't feel connected to each other. We think that we're not connected to the earth, right?
Yeah.
That we can continue to do whatever we want and the earth will be able to absorb it and still support our life form. Let me go to my space flight. I remember when I was in space, I looked out at the earth and there was this thin shimmering layer of blue light that our atmosphere. Absolutely stunning. You could see the earth almost like iridescent from within, just beautiful. And it confirmed something I always believed. At that time, people were always using the phrase, save the earth. The earth doesn't need to be saved.
We need to be saved.
We need to be saved.
Yeah.
It's the height of human hubris and arrogance to think that the earth needs us.
My dad's a scientist, and he always says, I say to him, Dad, I feel so bad, like what we're doing to the planet. And he's with the Department of Conservation in New Zealand, and he just says to me, Phil, don't worry about the earth. The earth is going to be fine. Everything that's happening on the crust of the earth eventually will fold in, and it will just recycle, and it will come back, and it will be long gone, and you do not need to worry about the earth.
That includes us, right?
Yes, we'll just be folded in and melted out. And
we have to make sure that we treat it in such a way that it continues to sustain our life form. And that's the big thing. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we connect? We can't tell people things because we already know these things.
yes,
Right? We already know this stuff. I think it's by experience, by giving them some other way of obtaining this. As humans, we learn through experience. And so it's really important to be able to provide positive kinds of experiences and experiences that make us think and move forward. You know, not just telling folks stuff, but people also be ready to listen to you once they have an experience that tells them this is important, that informs them.
we live in a country, and if I'm not mistaken, we use up, we're over 300 million people. We use up something like 30% of the world's resources. It's not sustainable. At some point, like you said, we have to see that we are all sharing this space and that there are only so many resources to go around. But like you said, there are so many ways that we should be sharing them. How does this happen? Does it mean that there's a large group of people that are going to have to make sacrifices? Is that the hurdle that we're getting over? Is this a commercial thing? I mean,
Let me just
because I
tell
think
you.
we all, in our hearts, we want to help people. Americans are generous people, right? So what's holding us back from?
So I think there's a lack of knowledge, and we have to remember that there are a large group of people in this world who are already making sacrifices for us, right? We have people digging for different kinds of minerals that go into making semiconductor materials, right, that power our computers and things like that.
People
and
in
they're being
fabric shops.
contaminated and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're making sacrifices for us. So if I'm sitting in a place that's over air conditioned in the summer in Texas, and then I begrudge someone the energy to refrigerate vaccines in a developing world, who's making a sacrifice?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I think we just haven't framed it. We haven't told the story as well. That's the reason why I think it's really important that we have lots of people helping to frame the stories, the information that we tell. And when I use the word story, I don't mean fiction. I mean, how do you communicate information?
Yeah.
You can communicate it through fictionalized stories and dramas, which is really exciting to be working on sort of Mars with Nat Geo, this hybrid series. Stories like Star Trek that says we went through all this stuff and we got to a future that was better. You can tell it through how you communicate a science lesson, right? There are lots of different ways. So a lot of my work has been to include other people, to include other voices, and get people involved in space exploration and science who perhaps hadn't been involved or invited in previously.
I understand you really want to see more young people getting involved in this world that we live in. Again, that's because of the future. You seem to be looking forward a lot. I know you're involved
No,
in
I look right here and now.
Yes.
So if you ever listen to me, people like to make me into a young person stuff. So I work with students. I
Yes.
started an international science camp called The Earth We Share, but I hold adults to task. You know, the reason why kids don't learn has nothing to do with kids. It has to do with adults. When we have a world where we would rather invest $1 million per bomb than $1 million per school,
Yeah.
we have a problem. That's not the kids' problem. That's the adults' problem. And so I always say that I want to challenge adults to do things. I look at the future, but I look at the past. I think it's all connected. You know, I work on this project called 100-Year Starship. It's about making sure that we have the capabilities for human interstellar flight within the next 100 years.
Is that going to be something that's essential?
It's the capabilities.
Yeah.
It's not a launch date. We're not trying to develop the enterprise.
Right.
Why do we want to push on capabilities? Because we need really radical leaps in technology and knowledge. We need to try something we don't know how to do in order to keep us going. We need that adrenaline rush. Everything that's needed for a human interstellar journey to go beyond our solar system is what we need to survive on this planet. It mirrors it. You talked about these finite resources.
Yeah.
We're on a starship right now,
Yeah.
right? We're on a self-contained
That's
starship.
that's a really interesting way of looking at it.
And so
There isn't an endless supply.
there's not an endless supply. So we have to figure out how to recycle, how to use, and really how to behave, how to get along.
I just love that. And also just the journey that you have taken and all of those changes that you've taken. And I just think about all the young people today and what's ahead for them, those who will travel into outer space. And I guess there are some people who ask, well, why, if we have this planet, we need to look after this planet, why are we looking up and why are we wanting to go out into space? Why is that important to continue to go out and explore outside this planet when we've got so much to do down here on Earth?
We can push ourselves harder. So sometimes we think that by just staying in this safe place, it's okay. But it's by pushing more. 100-Year Starship, our tagline is, we believe pursuing an extraordinary tomorrow creates a better world today. It's by doing those things that we actually don't know how to do, that we push harder, that makes a difference.
What's it going to take, do you think, for the majority of people to wake up?
We have to honor empathy and caring, that they shouldn't be dirty words. There's something strange going on right now where if you say, I want to do good, people look like you just want to be a do-gooder. What's wrong with being a do-gooder? Right? Have you noticed that's like a bad
It's like
thing?
a stigma attached to it.
It's a do-gooder.
Yeah.
How did that get to be a bad thing?
Yeah.
Right? And that everything should be done for profit. What we have to mix with that is this understanding that we're connected to the earth and to each other, and there is nothing wrong with doing good.
If you look back on your life and you're sitting and having a little reverie about your life, what are the things that you want to be remembered for? What are the things that are most important to you in life?
To be willing to risk things and to dare.
And you've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody who straps themselves to a rocket, I'm sorry, guys, that's like, wow. You know, I have this crazy desire to go up there. I really do.
If we can make contributions that, can I leave the world a little bit better than what I found it?
Yeah, well, you've already done that. I have a couple of questions I'd love to ask you.
Okay.
I'm just interested. You're clearly someone who likes to laugh. What makes you laugh?
I am really ashamed to say that
Yeah.
I laugh at slapstick stuff.
Okay. So you go on the internet and
It's
see
a-
cats and things doing crazy tricks and it makes you laugh.
No, it's the people falling.
There's nothing
Not
wrong with that.
hurting themselves.
Yeah.
But I will help, right? But I always tell people, because I laugh at myself if I fall.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's the slapstick stuff. There was this series of pictures about dumb things that men do. and why they have
Where would you start that
life
list?
expectancy. And like guys like climbing out on the side of a skyscraper, standing on an air conditioner trying to pass stuff to somebody else, or two guys like passing a big couch over the side of a balcony rail and one guy underneath gonna catch it. What in the blue? I mean, I know it's like, until I laughed until I cried and I started sitting around. It was one of those things that you see just randomly on the internet, and it's just
So if
over and over
If I
again.
type in dumb things that guys do, will some of
You
these...
might find it.
What about a road trip, Mae, if you could take anybody from history and you or maybe we should say, instead of a road trip driving across America, if you could take 3 people in the capsule with you up into space, who would you take with you if you could choose your passengers?
My cats.
Really? Okay.
So I would have loved, the thing that surprised me about space is I tried to make myself afraid. And I thought it would have been, having people there would have been perfect. But I would have loved to have been by myself in a bubble, and all I would have needed was my cat sneeze. It was that I felt that connected with the rest of the universe. I know that sounds a little bit, but it was that much of an inclusive feeling. You asked about a road trip across the country. A small car for a long period of time, that's kind of rough. You can have arguments and fall out with people, and then that might break that.
You know what I love,
thing.
Mae? It's like I ask people that question. They say, "Oh, I want the Dalai Lama. I want Mother Teresa. I want the Pope." And you're like, "Nah, I think I'll just take my cats." I love that. And just thinking, one of the I was lucky enough to go on Oprah's show once, and we were talking about taking your last breath. And the things that, you think about and what you would do if you knew you only had one day to live. What would you do with that day? The things, I guess, that would be most precious to you. So I just wondered about that. If you knew the end was coming, like what would you do with that last day on Earth? Or maybe not on Earth. I don't know.
I'd probably go outside on a field by myself and just think and feel and experience the universe around me. Because every day I try to, the best I can, not leave anything unspoken and have said, or to try to do things that I'm going to have to redress with people later on. So in that case, what's most important is to connect with the universe, because I'm going back to it. Because we're made up of star stuff. So we're going back to it.
Mae, you're amazing. And I want to thank you for mustering up the energy to come up here and talk to some crazy New Zealand guy you've never met before. And I know you've been through a huge day today, and you are truly amazing.
Thank you.
And a real inspiration. And I know that people are going to get a real kick out of. The thing I love the most, too, is just you have such a great life force and your sense of humor. You can watch this podcast online at philkeoghan.com. And let me know what's on your bucket list. You never know. You might be my next guest. Don't forget, tick it before you kick it.